Someone just posed the question on the help as to how would you make a graph like this one in DataGraph where you have the legend showing the size of the points along with the color fill that you can see here does a nice job of helping you pick out particular points. So what we're really seeing here are data where there's 3 variables represented. We have the total bill, the tip, and then a size variable that's also shown. And wasn't too hard for me to actually find this data set online. This is an R data set that you can see this is a website I use all the time to find data sets that are in R, and here is the data. So I'm going to bring this into DataGraph. I might as well just bring this into the clipboard now. So I'll select the data, do Command-C to copy. And in terms of looking just what's in DataGraph now, what is a similar sort of a data set? Well, I searched the examples on color point, and you can see that there's one here in the custom files. This is a points command used to plot XY data pairs where a third variable is used and shown via a color ramp. So not exactly what the what this person's looking for, but it's sort of similar. So let's just open this up and start with that, because I wanted to do some demos where I showed how to bring data into an existing file. So this gives us a chance to do that as well. So I have my data in the clipboard, and if I want to bring that data into DataGraph, what I want to do is just don't select anything here, because then it will think you want to append to existing columns. Make sure you don't have anything in the data table selected, and then just paste. Just do Command-V, and that will paste in your new data. This file has an X and a Y column, and then this third variable that's used for the color. Notice how these are all in bold, and with this, there's a little FX in the corner here. This is telling you that this data is all generated using a function. So I'm using some random number generator to put this data in. So how do I replace the data that's in this figure if I want to start with that? Well, I could use the menus here to select, but actually it's pretty easy to just, I can copy the columns that I want to use for X and Y. So again, select these columns, click copy, highlight where I want them to go, and now paste. And it just converts it to a number column and pastes the data in there. I can do the same thing for my column that is used for the color. So here's the column here. And actually I can also do a Command X to just cut that out, Command V to paste that into this spot. And now I actually have these columns repeated. So I'll go ahead and select these 3 columns and just hit the delete key to get rid of those. Okay, so now I have my data set. I have it plotted the way that I wanted to have this plotted. But again, this is using the color ramp legend, so this may not be the way that you would want to see this data. And let's see, a couple of other things here. I guess the X and Y labels, I can change these. Right now they're just typed in, but I could use a token if I click the right-hand side and select the X label from this command and select the, let's see, the Y label as well. Okay, and I didn't delete that. There we go. So one thing that you'll notice is that the way that the X label came in here looks a little different than it does from over here. This has an underscore in it, which is a way to have things be a subscript. You can use the caret to do superscripts. But right now, by default, it just does the first letter after that. If I don't want this to be a subscript at all, then there's actually a functionality here where if you click on the token, you can say ignore underscore and caret, and then it will just hit enter, and then you can see how the underscore is just showing there. If you actually wanted, let me bring it back. If you say you wanted this, the part bill to all be a subscript, then you can place it in curly braces, and then you see there that's just says total bill as the subscript. that looks sort of nice. So maybe we'll just leave it like that. Okay, so we have this data, we have the points. Let's go ahead now and do the scaling. So if we go back to the plot here, we again want to scale the size of the points with this column. And to do that, I would go into the points command, and there is an option for size that's currently set to uniform. I want it to vary based on this size variable. When I do that initially, all the points are getting very small, because what this does is this will scale the whatever this value is, it will multiply it by whatever number I have the slider set to, and that determines the point size for the point, instead of using what is done is using the point variable by default up here, 6-point size. So anyway, so for this I have to make it bigger to be able to see this. The other option you have here is to change from area to diameter, and from already testing this out, I know that with this data, it's actually scaled using the diameter, which creates a much larger difference from small values to large values. So if that is what you want, then you can change that to diameter and see what that looks like here. We actually by default have it set to area, just so you don't mistakenly select that. But in any case, now this is starting to look a lot more like the graph that you have here. But what else could we change? Well, I might as well let's just keep going and really do some formatting before we actually get into how do we set up the actual legend that I'll show you how to create one of those. So a couple of other things. What does this file has? Well, it has a background that's gray. I can change that in my canvas settings. That's this section of the interface here, where you have you can change all sorts of the colors. So if I just want only the axis background, I can add a color to that. By default, it's white, but I could go into the color picker and pick a gray for that if I like. The gray value that's used in that graph has a slight blue tint. Anyway, so there's that. And then if I want to have my grid lines be white, that's actually in the style settings themselves. So that's this top section. If we scroll down a little bit, you'll see how it says grid, and there's a color here that is currently set to gray. I can change that to just being a white color, and I can also increase the size of that if I want that to be a little bit thicker. So now that's looking much more similar to what we have here. We'll leave this graph kind of as is for the moment. And instead of changing the colors and adding the different legend on this, we'll leave this legend the way that it is as an option. And we'll just go ahead and click the clone button to make a copy of this to demonstrate how would I now make this other type of legend. So in this copy, let's go ahead and get rid of the color ramp. I can click exclude or just hit the delete key to get rid of that if I'm not using it. Also the label that I have here, again, I can exclude or I might as well just delete it. I'm not going to use it. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that there is a bit of a gap here. I would assume, having gone into this file, that I probably have set a margin, or if I or someone, whoever set up this example, probably has a margin hard-coded in here. And sure enough, if I go into my canvas settings, the bottom section is where we have all the margins, and I can change this if I like and just delete that to bring it back to being automatic. And then, slightly different aspect ratio, but I think that's probably what I would do if I were creating this graph. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do now is, again, let's go ahead now and create this, work on creating this legend. But what I also want to do is I would like to have the colors in this one be discrete colors. Right now, what I'm using is a color ramp, which is it's not necessarily bad to be using this, but really if this were my data and I had this column that I was setting the size to, and these are all just, integer values, if you want to click this column and hit the space bar, you can get a quick graph that shows you this is going from 1 to 6. So just like that, if you go back to the original graph, each value that's in that column is represented here in this legend, and 2 being the most common value. But because these are discrete, I would probably, instead of using a color ramp, as is done in this file, I would use a color scheme where each number has a color that is set to it. If you just look in the color ramp, for example, this is actually, again, you can see by just what it looks like. It's a continuous color. In this file, it's set up to use the data based on the min, the median, and the maximum of the data itself, which are also variables here. Instead of using the color ramp, we're going to use the color scheme. And to do that, we can go over here into our points command, and you'll see where there is a fill section where the color ramp is currently selected. If you use that menu, you'll see that there is an option that says create color scheme. I'll select that. When I do, you get this arrow over on the left-hand side that's pointing you to the color scheme that was created. Let me expand the variable section here so you can see this. Expand this color scheme out that was created, and you can see every value that we have in our data from 1 to 6 is shown here. There's actually a way to change the number of bins. If you click on the gear menu, you get some options, but in this case, this is what we want, unique values. We have 6 different entries that you can see here, and they are currently set to this particular color scheme. But also, if I click the gear menu, you can see all of the different color schemes that are in DataGraph, and we can pick something that's similar to the one that's in the original file. You can see these colors that are here. Now, when I looked at this earlier, I didn't necessarily see an exactly similar color scheme that we have in terms of the ones, you can kind of pick through these and they look nice, but they're not the same that you see here. So what I can do is I can actually just set each one of these color tiles. So you click on the color tile, and that will give you the color wheel, and you can click the little dropper here, go over to this screen, and just select the color that you want to use for each one of these tiles. And honestly, it doesn't take that long. There's 6 of them. So I'm just going to go through and use the color dripper to do this. So now I've done all of these, and I have the same color scheme here that you see on the graph that we're mimicking over here. I guess you can see a difference in the background color. Again, if you just really want to see how would I recreate that, I can do the same with the color that I have set to the background color, use the color dripper, click that onto that background color, and now we get the color you see. I do have an outline around this graph, which you don't see in the other one, so you can change the box style from one box to, let's see, sometimes I forget which one, to only axis will just show you the a line where the axis is. And is that how? Let's look at this one here. Actually, this doesn't have any line. This only has the numbers around the edge. You can do that. If you really wanted to mimic that as well, we would use a custom axis. It would be one way to do that. Or I can probably, actually here, if I just change the pen color to white, yeah, that's one way to kind of get rid of it because my background's white. If you really wanted that to match, then changing the pen color white would also give you that look. Okay, so now what do we have left to do? Well, now we're going to talk about how would I add this legend where you see both the point color and the point size. There is currently no built-in legend that does that for you. This is something that would be a good thing to add, because I know I see this commonly in graphs. But although we don't have a built-in option for it, you can build it. And I've done this for various types of axes before, to really make something, or sorry, legends, to make something really custom. So first of all, how is this even possible? Well, let me actually, let me just give this color scheme a name, close this over here. And to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to use the points command to literally plot other points that use 1 to 6 and just are set to the same exact color scheme and color ramp. So, or sorry, color scheme and size. So let me go ahead and start with, what do I need to do this? And the easiest way to set this up is to have a column where I have 1 to 6 set up in a number column. So I'm going to add a new column, and we'll go ahead and actually just put this over at the end. Now, what I often do in this situation is I want to copy every unique entry from this column. You can't do this by default right now with number columns, but I can convert this to a text column. I can then use copy unique entries. I can convert this back to a number column, so now everything goes back to the way that it was. Go over to this new column that I've set up, and I'll paste this data in there. So now I have that every unique value in a column instead of having to type them. I'll also convert this back to a number. I think we will at some point add this so you can get unique values from number columns also. But anyway, that's what I do. It's easy enough to switch it back and forth. I'll also add a column divider here just to kind of keep a separation between my data and this new column I've added. And so what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to, again, plot these or use the points command to create these points. And I'm going to do this in a new graph. The type of graph I'm going to use is a new graph for composition. So if you select that, I get a blank screen where, notice you don't see any axis ranges here. This is a graph where the canvas is set up with the margins all the way to the edge, so you don't see anything. I can delete that graphic command, that gets added automatically. But what we're going to do is we're going to size this so that it will be the size of the legend that I want to show in my graph here. So maybe I want it to be 1 inch wide, and because this is about a 6-inch graph. So anyway, let me continue so you can see how this is going to work. So I'm going to take this column and let's add a points command with this data. The pen size was white, so it didn't show me the points, but I'll change that back to black so we can see. Here they are. There's these points, and when I did that, what DataGraph will do by default is just have the X value be the row number. But what I want to do, you can see the row number there on the side. What I want to do is actually specify the X location so that these will all be lined up the way that I want them to be in my legend. And then when I go into my command, I'm going to, again, set the fill based on the size, but it will be this new column that I have set up. And we'll use the same color scheme, so you can see that there. Now the size is also going to be based on, or the size of the point is going to use the size column, where we're going to, there we go, we can scale that. But here, I want to use the same scaling factor that I did for this command. And this is where variables can be so handy when you're doing something a little unique. So let's go ahead and set up a slider. And this will be my scale. And if I expand out my original points command, it looks like I have a value of 3.3. So maybe this will scale, I don't know, let's say from 1 to 10, just to give us a range that's similar. And now what I'm going to do is put this variable in this location. And so I'm no longer using the slider here, but if I change this slider, these points will scale. And I'm going to put the same variable here. So you can see now when I do this, they both scale. Actually, maybe it's a little hard to see, but another thing that I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to reverse the order in the Y direction. So I get my smaller point on the top and my larger one on the bottom. I also want to add a label on the right-hand side, and my label is going to be the same column that I'm using. So again, here's the section where I can add labels. I select that size column, and I can specify how I want that to be aligned. And I'm going to align this to the right and center of my point. Actually didn't really change much, but this gives you the offsets. By default, these are set to the point size, which when you're labeling points usually makes sense. But since I'm scaling this, what I want to do in the in the Y direction, I don't want it offset at all. So I'll just say 0, and then I can increase the offset a little bit in the X direction to what I want that to be. So that looks pretty nice. And now maybe I want them a little bit more compact. So I could, change my size here of the whole legend. So let me show you how do I bring this in to my graph here. And the easy way to do that is, this is essentially using a graphic command to show it here within this image. But I can just do a drag and drop on this. So now when I've highlighted the image that my other graph is going to be brought into as an image of sorts, and a dynamic image. But you can see I can click and drag this, and I'm going to drop it right there within the command list. And then there it is. I can drag it around. So we're going to still need to do a little bit of formatting on this. One of the things is that there's no background by default here. So I can make my background, if I go, here we go, back to this original. Again, this is using this canvas background quite a bit for this. I can add the solid color. So now you can see that solid color there. I can go ahead and give this a box style. So now if you want to see what this looks like, you can start to see this here. And let's just show you again what's happening. So when I change this scale, it's all changing dynamically at the same time. This is still a little bit, a little long for what I would want this to be. So I can go ahead and maybe decrease this, a little bit more. And now this is starting to look a little bit closer to what I'd like this to be. Maybe they don't need to be quite so big. Actually, in that case, then this can go even, a little smaller. Let's see, 1.2. And I may want the font also smaller within this legend. So this is, it takes a little bit of tweaking. Again, this is not automatic, but you can see how this is being constructed, and how you can really adjust how this looks. Now, I guess I went a little bit overboard in my offset here on the numbers. So now I have a decent looking legend. If we compare this to the one here, this also has a title and it's a little bit more centered. And these are all things that I can adjust. If I go back to my legend here. Oh, I do notice though, if you look at this carefully, it's an important thing to notice. My points here for 6 are not scaling correctly. And this is one, maybe a good mistake to make, just to, again, point out this difference. So the reason is that I created this new command. And again, by default, the way it scales the points is using the area, not the diameter. And for these to match, I do have to make sure that they're both being scaled by diameter. So now you can see that these points match and the scaling matches. If I want to add a title into this, then I can again go back here and I would use a text command. Add that in. Let's see, go ahead and name this scale, and then place this at the upper center of the graph, align it center, but I need to add a little bit of a little more padding on the axis for this to work, so it's not overlapping my data. What I find helpful when doing graphs, sort of using this approach, is to click on this where you can say draw X and Y numbers, and you'll see on the image how the axes are now shown here. So when I'm done, I want to uncheck those, but it allows me to kind of see what the scale is, because again, I have this reversed. So I'll need to add into my range in the y-axis. I can add in a negative number here to give this bump the scale a little bit. So now you can see, if I go over to here, you can see how this looks. It's starting to, get closer and closer to what I want this to look like. And I can also use this to adjust on the other end of the y-axis if I want to add a little bit more padding on the other end. Maybe I do something like that, and maybe make this again still a little bit longer. So now let's see, what is the only other thing maybe I would do here is if you wanted to center this a little bit more, then in the X direction, I could add a little bit of padding in that direction. So possibly, let's see, if I do 2, then that's going to be way too much. But if I say 1.2 or maybe 1.5, actually I can just set what the range is for this to kind of give me a little bit more control. Oh, that's way too much. That looks pretty good. If I go back over to my legend here, now again, you see these X and Y axes being shown. I'm not going to do that in my final version. I'll unhide these. Let's go ahead and, I always like to kind of close things down to tidy things up a little bit here. So I'm pretty satisfied with that. That looks nice. And because it's coming in from another command, I can, move this within this figure to where I would like it to be shown. But if I change my scaling, you can see how everything changes accordingly. Possibly in a future version, we'll have an automatic way to do something like this, but at least you can see how you can construct it, and we will put this file into the online example so that you can use this. I have a quick addendum to what I just did, because there's something interesting that I noticed when I was just looking at these graphs and finalizing them, and it has to do with the size of the points in the legend versus the size of the points in the graph itself. And I noticed this because as I was looking at what I created, you can see how this point here for 1 is really small, and compared to the scale that you see here, I've zoomed this in, but this is not anywhere near as small, and it doesn't show as big of a difference between these point sizes. So I was thinking about, again, this, how do you scale by area versus diameter? And in fact, I was wrong earlier when I said they were scaling by diameter. They are scaling this by area in terms of getting these point sizes, but what's surprised me is if you look at the width of these points. I don't know how easy it is for you to really see this, but if I measure this point, this is 31 pixels across approximately, And I can do the same thing here. I do this when I'm doing screenshots, kind of. But this can give me the pixel sizes. So this is about 26 pixels. Now, that may not sound like a very big difference, but if you look at this point here versus one of these points, they're not the same size, which I did not expect. And that's kind of what I was judging the point size in terms of how things were scaling. And one of the reasons I misjudged how the points were being scaled with relative to the numbers. Anyway, the way that we're setting this up in DataGraph, I think is more rigorous in the sense that the point you see within the legend is matching the size of the point that's in the graph itself. So if we go back to DataGraph and you measured these point sizes, then they match exactly. That's kind of the whole point for the way that we set this up, right? That as I change this scale, I get an exact match. Now, but what I see here is, again, the circle, the dot for value equal to 1 is so small that it's a little bit difficult to see. Now, I can go ahead and just change this to being area for both of these commands. And then if I scale this up, now you can get a scaling factor that looks more like the one from the graph that we're mimicking. And you can see now the points at 1 are much easier to see. The other thing I wanted to just point out very quickly is that, this was some effort to set this up, and you can use this file now in our templates to base other things on if you're interested in that. But what we do have in DataGraph is the ability to show the color scheme. It just doesn't show the points scaled like this. So if you wanted to do that, then let me go ahead. Actually, I'll go ahead and again clone this graph, and we'll do a version that has that. So I can delete from this the scale that I added here, and I'm going to add a custom legend. And when I do, I can expand this out. What I'm going to show is the variable itself. So you would click here on variable. The color scheme is listed as an option in this menu, and then you can see the colors there and do some additional adjusting of the size. If you want to add a legend title, then that's easy enough to do. And I can scale down the font size here so that it looks a little bit nicer. We'll go ahead and put this in the upper left corner, and we don't want to cover up that point, so we'll go ahead and move that maybe right into that corner there. Okay, so now this video is in fact going to end, and the file that we'll post online will have both versions of this graph. It'll show you the graph using the built-in color ramp legend here, or sorry, it's not color ramp legend, using the built-in color scheme for the legend, and then showing you also how to create a unique legend here with the points command.